Hi, folks. I'm Nathaniel Stinnett, the Executive Director of the Environmental Voter Project, and we are a nonprofit that identifies millions of environmentalists who don't vote, and then we turn them into better voters. We use cutting-edge behavioral science to message to these non-voting environmentalists, and we work with thousands of volunteers around the country to help make our campaigns happen. And today, we have what we call a mini briefing, a really, really short briefing on what we're seeing in our data in Pennsylvania and what we're planning to do to mobilize our voters in Pennsylvania this fall. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Here we go. The Environmental Voter Project has identified over 245,000 low propensity climate voters in Pennsylvania. So what do I mean by that? These are 245,000 people who are registered to vote. They are likely to not just care about climate and the environment, but literally listed as their #1 priority. And we think they're unlikely to show up and cast a ballot in November unless mobilized to do so. And why do we think that? Because we've looked at their voting history. And we can see that they did not vote in the 2020 presidential election or any elections since then. So 245,000 of these already registered super environmentalists who are sitting on the sidelines. And that's a huge pool of potential political power in a crucially important state. All right, so what's some context for that? What does 245,000 mean in a state like Pennsylvania? Well, as you can see down here, in 2020, Pennsylvania was decided by only 80,000 votes. So the margin was 1/3 the size of this pool of low propensity environmental voters. And I'm sure you don't need me to tell you how crucially important Pennsylvania is in 2024. It's probably the key state to deciding who is going to be in the White House. It's got a close US Senate race. It's got a close Attorney General race. It's got count them, five congressional races that are currently rated as competitive by the Cook Political Report. And both houses of their state legislature are super, super tight. So a good way to think about this is any voter anywhere in Pennsylvania who goes and pulls a ballot, they're going to look at that ballot and 3, 4, maybe 5 races on it are going to be super close and super important. And so every new voter we get to show up on election day or to vote early could make a huge difference up and down the ballot. All right. Who are these non-voting environmentalists in Pennsylvania? Well, if you look at the bottom here, the very, very bottom row says reg voters. What that is demographic crosstabs or subsections of all registered voters in Pennsylvania. Then if you look at the row above it, LPEVs, that stands for low propensity environmental voters. These are these people we're targeting. And so the first thing you can see is that 80% of the low propensity environmental voters in Pennsylvania are under the age of 35. And if that sounds like a big number, it's because it is, because look at the bottom row here. Only 24% of registered voters are under the age of 35 in Pennsylvania. So the first thing to take away from this data at the bottom of the slide here is that these low propensity environmental voters are disproportionately young. That probably comes as no surprise to many of you. But I'd like to point out over here the racial demographic breakdowns. Because one thing you'll see is that Pennsylvania is a very, very white state. The electorate in Pennsylvania is 82% white. But these low propensity environmental voters that we're targeting at the Environmental Voter Project are much less white, 67% white. And this disproportionately people of color sort of aspect of our target population here is driven largely by Black voters being twice as prevalent in our target population, and Asian American and Pacific Islander voters being 3 times as prevalent in our target population. So Black voters and AAPI voters are disproportionately represented in this group of low propensity environmental voters. All right, another thing that's crucially important to point out about Pennsylvania and low propensity environmental voters in particular is that both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh have what people in field campaigns call canvassable density. So let me back up a bit. At the Environmental Voter Project, there are only 4 locations across the entire country where these low propensity environmental voters are so tightly packed together, and we can knock on a lot of their doors so they don't live in high rises or they're not in like gated communities, that we've decided, yeah, let's turn this area into what we call a canvassing hub, because there is so much canvassable density. There's so many people whose doors we can knock on who live right next to each other. 2 out of those 4 places are in Pennsylvania. As you can see, in Philadelphia, we've identified 46,000 of these low propensity environmental voters, and almost 27,000 of them can be easily canvassed. So you can knock on their door, they'll show up. Moreover, they're close to other people, so you don't have to waste a lot of time going from one door to the next door. And as you can see, Pittsburgh has over 12,000 of these canvassable low propensity environmental voters. And this is so important because even in this high-tech era, and even with so much sort of distributed work that volunteers can do from the comfort of their own home, one human being talking to another human being in person is still the single most effective way to turn a non-voter into a new voter. And so door-to-door canvassing really, really matters. And in Pennsylvania, we probably have the population of potential new voters that is most able to be canvassed. And that's a huge, huge opportunity there. All right. It is super close in Pennsylvania right now. This is from 538.com. You'll see the average of presidential polls has Harris up over Trump by 0.5 percentage points. That is a dead heat. No matter how you look at it, that is a dead heat. Polling can be very accurate, despite what many people say, but it's not meant to be this accurate. Polls are not meant to be so precise that they can tell, a 0.5 percentage point difference between candidates. No, this is a dead heat. It's a dead heat. It's a dead heat. The last thing that I just want to say about Pennsylvania is we actually have some fresh polling data at the Environmental Voter Project in Pennsylvania. So back in August, we polled, and this was a huge, huge sample size poll, we polled young people in 5 battleground states that you'll see right here. And we asked them a whole bunch of questions, but one of the things we were most curious about is whether they were aware of all of the ways in which they could vote. In-person early voting perhaps being one of the most important. And you'll see 46% of already registered young voters in Pennsylvania didn't know that their state had early voting. They didn't know. Now, I want to be clear, Pennsylvania is a little odd. Their version of early voting means you need to go to your county elections office, which isn't always close to where people live, and you ask for a ballot, fill it out, and then hand it in there. But still, even though that's a little inconvenient, even though it's a little different from what early voting is in many other states, this is a real problem that almost half of 18 to 34-year-olds who are already registered to vote in maybe the most important swing state in the entire country don't even know that early voting exists in their state. This is also actionable. This is a very, very simple thing that you can tell voters that will dramatically increase their likelihood of voting. And you better believe that we're going to be taking advantage of it at the Environmental Voter Project over the coming weeks. All right, that's it. I told you it would be a very, very quick mini briefing. If you want to get involved in our work, mobilizing the 245,000 low propensity climate voters we've identified in Pennsylvania, you can scan this QR code, or you can go to one of the links in the notes of this video. You can donate to support our work. We are getting every donation right back out the door to mobilize voters in the field. You can also, on our website, volunteer for phone banks or door-to-door canvassing in Pennsylvania. And of course, it is always helpful if you subscribe to our YouTube page. You can click subscribe. You'll get a notification whenever we have one of these mini briefings or one of our other videos. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes learning about our work at the Environmental Voter Project in Pennsylvania. And I hope to see your donation come in, or see you on the doors, or see you on the phone banks. Take care.